I just want to start off and say thank you so much for watching this video and making the pattern. It really means a lot to me. So today I use this Kevin as a reference, but we actually end up making this grumpy Kevin. So this is the one I actually made in the video, but I will be referencing this one throughout. I also just want to say that throughout you'll hear me, instead of saying fasten off, I say finish off. It's a mistake and I couldn't be bothered recording it all again, so hope you don't mind. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. See you. So today I've made a wee video just to show you how to make one of my minions, Kevin. I'm really proud of him and I hope you enjoy making him. So these methods can also be used to make Bob here and Stuart. You'll see in a second. There he is. With just some differences in the height and width, but they're pretty similar. But today we are going to focus on Kevin here. Hope you enjoy! Okay, so the materials you're going to need is some yellow yarn, black yarn, your blue yarn, and here's a little bit extra that I had left over I'm going to use. Some grey yarn and a bit of white yarn for the eyes. And you can use any yarn type and size that you like. It just changes the size of your character. So here are some bobs I made. On the right we have a bob made with a 4.5mm hook, and on the left I used a 5mm hook, so you can see those differences. So here's the 4.5mm hook that I'm using today. And again, just choose whatever size you like. It'll just change the size of your character. You'll need some stuffing, any will work, some scissors. Now I use some thread because I use sew on eyes, but if you prefer to use eyes with backs, that should be okay too. And then you'll need your stitch marker, you'll need your needle for sewing, and I use a little bit of glue, but that's just because I use the sewing eyes and I find that I need a wee dot of glue, but if you use the eyes with backs, you should be fine. Okay, we're going to make our body now. So starting with your yellow yarn, you're going to make 6 single crochets into your magic ring. So here's me doing that. Okay, and then I just move my stitch marker to the last stitch, and now we are going to increase around, so that should bring us to 12 stitches. Move that stitch marker, and we're going to single crochet increase around to bring us to 18 stitches. Now we're going to do 2 single crochets and then increase around to bring us to a total of 24 stitches. Move that stitch marker, and now we're going to do 3 single crochets and then an increase around to bring us to 30 stitches. Now at this point you are going to single crochet around for 17 rounds. So see you then. Welcome back. So now we are going to do 4 single crochets and then an increase around, and in your last stitch you are going to get your blue colour and pull that through just like so, and then we'll move our stitch marker, and now you are going to slip stitch around into the back loop only of every stitch. So here's me doing that, and pull through, and again in the back loop only, and you are going to do that the whole way around. Move that stitch marker, And now you are going to single crochet around, but again into the back loop only. Move that stitch marker, and now you are going to do 2 rounds of single crochets. Okay, now you're going to move your stitch marker, and then you are going to do 4 single crochets and decrease around. Move that stitch marker. Now you're going to do 3 single crochets and decrease around. Okay, and now we're going to do 2 single crochets and decrease around. And then here I just pull up a big loop because we're about to turn them inside out. So at this point I cut off my loose ends, and I personally like to tie them, but that's just a personal preference. You don't have to do that. And then we are going to turn him inside out. So what's really nice is you can see here how clean that color change is just from doing those rounds in the back loop. And now we're going to do a single crochet and then a decrease around to give us a total of 12 stitches. It's time to get your stuffing, and we're going to stuff here. So there's no real right way of doing this, just stuff it, and I like to stuff it quite nice and firmly, and then you'll see me in a second. I like to give him a wee roll around. There we go. And I just roll in between my hands like that, to make that nice kind of even shape. And you can really stuff him whatever way you want, and I like to add extra stuffing in the bottom, make sure he's nice and filled in the bottom, and then we are going to cut that blue yarn whenever you finish stuffing. And instead of doing 6 decreases here, I kind of weave my yarn around. You'll see me doing it in a second here. And then pulling tight, because I think sometimes those 6 decreases can get a bit messy, or maybe your tension doesn't stay right, but I find that this creates quite a nice finish to the bottom of your pieces. So yeah, I basically just sew into every stitch around, and at each point kind of giving it a wee tug, you'll see, just to make sure that it's still able to pull through, because you wouldn't want to sew to the end and then try and pull and nothing's pulling through. So yeah, just giving it a wee tug at each point. So when you finish sewing through that final loop, you are then going to put your needle through that loop that you had at the beginning, which was the end of your last round, and you are just going to pull that nice and tight, like so. You might need to give it a bit of a tug, but that should close up nicely. And then basically at this point, I just kind of weave in this loose end a couple of times. There we go. And then at that point you can just cut that loose end and just check you're happy with everything, and then I just poke in that little loose end there. And I always give it this kind of, yeah, the little wiggle just to make sure it's fully in there. And there you go, that is your body done. So well done on getting this far. Okay, so now we are going to make the fronts and the backs of the dungarees. So the front and back is the exact same, so we just need to make 2 of those. So you are going to start by chaining 10. And now in your second stitch from the hook, you are going to single crochet in each of these until you reach the end. And when you reach the end, you are going to chain 1 and turn your work. And then you are going to do the exact same and single crochet in every stitch from the second stitch from hook. And again, chain 1, turn your work, and the exact same, single crochet in each chain from the second chain from hook. And that is you finished. So you can cut your yarn and finish it off. There we go. And then just come back when you've made another one of these. So now that you've made your 2, we're going to start sewing these on. So first I find the back where we've got this little step, and that is where I sew one of my dungarees on, and that is going to be the back of your minion. So I just cover up that little step using the dungarees. So I'm gonna get our needle, and I start by finding this smaller end, and that was where you actually started. That was your slip knot. And I just weave this end through to kind of keep everything in place. So at that point, I'm going to get my longer end, which is going to be used for the sewing on. And there's no real right way of sewing on. I actually don't think I'm very good at sewing things on, so I'm not going to give you loads of advice. The only thing I can say here is try and make sure that the top of your dungarees is continuing in a straight line. So try and keep it along one of the rows of yellow, and be putting your kind of stitches into that same row the whole way along. But really sew on whatever way you want. And then once I'm finished, I just weave in that last end. There you go. And that is one side of your dungaree sewn on. So now we're going to grab the other side of our dungarees, and this will be the front. And basically you want to make it kind of symmetrical to the back side and make sure there's an even space on both sides of that yellow. So the way I do this is exactly what I'm doing here, kind of follow that blue around by pushing it up, and that will give you a kind of approximate where you should be putting your front. And then at this point I just kind of check both sides and try and see if they're the same amount of yellow stitches on both sides of the blue. So once you're happy, then I do the exact same. I weave in that bottom end and then I sew on. Once again, when you're finished, just weaving in that loose end. And then I'm just gonna poke in all my loose ends at this point. Cut them shorter if you need to, if they're a bit long. Okay, he's looking pretty clean and nice at this point. So it's time to start on the eyes. We need our white yarn and our grey yarn, but we'll start with the white. So we start with 6 single crochets into our magic ring. And now we are going to single crochet, increase around. And in the last stitch, you just want to pull through your grey yarn. And now you are going to single crochet around in your new color. And when you finish that round, you just want to slip stitch into the first stitch of the last round so that you have that grey color the whole way round. And then you can finish off. So now I'm just going to sort the back out. So I'm going to cut all of these a bit shorter because you want them hidden behind the eye. And personally, I tie those 2 strands from the color change together, but you don't have to do this. And then I cut everything nice and short so that it sits nicely behind the eye when it's sewn on. So now I'm going to kind of push this grey bit back, and that is going to give us a bit of a bowl shape, which we don't really want in the end result, but don't worry about that now. We will get that sorted out. And I feel like with the eye, there's a lot of times you're going to be doing this and you think it's going wrong or want to frog it, but just trust the process here. So I'm going to get my sew on eyes and my thread, and essentially what I'm going to want to do is just sew that eye onto the middle, like around there. So I'm just going to thread that eye on and just kind of go out one side, and then with the other side of the thread I'll go kind of to the other side of the eye so that the actual safety eye sits around the middle. Okay, and now once you've done that, I'm just going to cut these threads a little shorter, and then I'm going to tie these, and I'm going to try and tie these really tight. And then again, we want those threads to sit behind the eye, so just cut them quite nice and close. And at this point, you're going to think this looks awful, like the way it's sitting out like that. But we are going to sort this out, so don't worry about that. It doesn't look right at all right now, but this is kind of where I get the glue, and the glue comes in handy. So basically what I do is I get a little dot of glue behind the eye, and now you only need a wee dab. I personally use super glue. I think hot glue would work as well. I haven't personally used fabric glue. Maybe it would work, I'm not sure. And you just want to press this eye down to where you want it to sit. And you're going to hold that for a few seconds just to make sure it's nice and stuck on. And once you're happy with that, you will see that the other side is kind of sitting up now. So we're going to do the same again. Underneath this side, you're going to put a wee dot of glue. Just there. And then you're going to press that down again where you want it. And hold for a few seconds. And then that is it finished, and you can see how much more nicely and flat that is sitting. I'm so much happier with this. And basically, if any of parts are still sitting up, you can add another wee dot of glue, but here I didn't think I needed it. So that's that. And now you are just going to repeat the exact same steps with the white and the grey, and then adding that safety eye, and come back when you've done that. Okay, so now that you've got your 2 eyes finished, you are basically just going to sew them on, and you want to move them up and down a bit and see where you think they look good. And once you're happy with the position, you're just going to get that end that you've left for sewing in the grey, and you're going to sew on along that grey edge. So just sew in and out of the grey part of the goggles. So once you've finished sewing, you can weave in that loose end, and then just repeat all of that for the second eye. So I've just finished my second eye there, and now what we're going to do is we are going to make the goggles kind of 3D, where they sit out above the eyes. So how we're going to do that is get our grey yarn and chain as many as needed to fit over that grey part of the goggles. So if you watch here, you'll see what I mean. I basically just start chaining. It's a bit of trial and error, and then I'm going to lay that over the grey part of the goggles like this, and you want to make sure it's long enough that it wraps around completely. So I need to add a few more chains there. Yeah, you just want that to make the full circle, and then once you're happy with your length, you can just fasten off. And then just repeat that again for the other side of the goggles. Okay, so there's 2 types of eyes that we have. We have these wide kind of eyes like on this Kevin, but actually today I'm going to show you how to do this eyelid like on Stuart, and there's two slightly different methods for these eyes. So if you're wanting to do the wide-eyed look like on the Kevin, all you need to do is get your chain, wrap it round like that, and then sew it on, and that is your eyes finished. And put the other chain on the other eye, and that is you done. But we're going to make the eyelid, so what you need to do is get your yellow and chain 5. This is to make your eyelid. And then once you've reached the end, you can turn and do a single crochet in every stitch, starting from the second stitch from hook. And once you've finished that, then you can just fasten off. And then come back when you've made 2, like so. And once you've made your 2, we are going to sew them onto the eye. So you just want to place them where they're going to be covering kind of half of that safety eye. It's really up to personal preference. I found around half looks best, and I just start by kind of weaving in that smaller end up somewhere to hold it in place. My hands were slippy there. And then yeah, just so I think around there looks quite good. Maybe just under half of the safety eye actually. It's really up to personal preference. And then once you're happy with that, you just sew it on over the eye. And then weave in that end. And then you're going to do the exact same on the other side. Okay, so that is your eyelids done, and now we're going to move on to doing the goggles. So basically we are going to wrap this round, and we want it so it's kind of covering the edge of those eyelids, and all you're going to do is overlay that over the grey of the eye, and then we're going to sew that on. So I just, like usual, take the shorter end and weave it in to hold it in place. And I find this part of sewing really difficult, but if I can manage, you definitely can as well. So I think around there looks good. And you're literally just sewing that on top of the grey of the eye, just going around in that circle. And there's going to be times where you're sewing on this grey part and the eyes are going to kind of move around and you're going to think it's not looking too good, but honestly just trust the process. We'll sort it out after, but you'll see mine as well. There's a point where mine is really not looking good here, but it all sorts itself out in the end, so don't be worrying too much. So I just weave in that end, and once you've sewn that on, you're going to repeat the exact same for the other eye. Okay, so exactly like I said, right now he is not looking good. He looks kind of like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, a bit of a gargoyle. Trust the process, like I said. So basically, if you did the normal Kevin, you only needed to do that one chain of grey and put them on top. But for the eyes with the eyelids, we're going to do another chain of grey and sew that on top again, just so that the eyelids aren't poking out of the goggles too far. I kind of found that with the eyelids, another chain of grey looked good. So you're going to do exactly the same as you did before, chain as many as fits around, and then sew them on. Okay, there we go. So I think that's looking a bit better already. But basically, we have this gap in between the eyes, and you could be not lazy, or you could be lazy like me. I honestly put a dot of glue in there and just hold them together. I think it's kind of the easiest way, but if you want to sew them together, you are more than welcome to do that. And I just think this finishes off the eyes really nicely. They look a lot better when they're right beside each other, I think. I think that already looks a lot better than before. And then at this point, I just poke in all my loose ends. Okay, it's time to make the arms. So we're going to start with our black yarn, and we are going to do 6 single crochets into the magic ring. Now we're going to single crochet increase around for a total of 9 stitches. Once we've done that, we are going to do 2 single crochets and increase around for a total of 12 stitches. And then we're going to do 2 rounds of single crochets. Okay, now we're going to do 2 single crochets and decrease. And then once you get to that last stitch, you are going to pull through into the yellow. And then you are going to slip stitch around into the back loop only. Then once you've done that, you are going to single crochet around into the back loop only. And then you are going to single crochet around for 7 rounds. And once you've done this, you can fasten off. Okay, and then with those kind of loose ends, I cut them shorter. Where the color change was, I tie it. You don't have to do this. This is just personal preference. And then repeat that process to make another arm. Okay, so now we are going to make the legs. So let's get started. You're going to start with your black yarn, and you're going to do 6 single crochets into the magic ring. And then you are going to single crochet increase around for a total of 9 stitches. So now you're going to do 3 single crochets, 3 increases, and another 3 single crochets for a total of 12 stitches. And now we are going to do 5 single crochets, 2 increases, and then 5 single crochets for a total of 14 stitches. Okay, now we're just going to single crochet around. And now we're kind of going to do the opposite. So we are going to do 5 single crochets, 2 decreases, and another 5 single crochets for a total of 12 stitches. and then we're going to do 3 single crochets, 3 decreases and another 3 single crochets for a total of 9 stitches. And in that last stitch you're going to pull through your blue yarn. And now you are going to slip stitch around into that back loop only, and then you're going to single crochet around into that back loop only. And once you've done that, you do 1 round of just single crochets around, and then at the end of that you can fasten off. And here again, I just like to cut my loose ends and tie where that colour changes. And come back when you've made another leg. Okay, so we now have our 2 legs and our 2 arms, and basically we're going to want to stuff them now, but what we're going to do first is, with the arms, we're just going to turn them inside out, like so. Sometimes I get a bit stuck around this point, so I get my crochet hook and use the back of it just to help push that through. And then do the same with the other one. Okay, and then we're going to want to stuff. So with the arms, you want to stuff really lightly, because if they're too full, they sit really far out from the body. So I put a decent amount of stuffing into the hands, that's fine. But with the actual yellow arm part, I barely stuff them. I just put enough in so that you can feel that there's something there. But yeah, and then I just give it a wee roll. So don't worry if the yellow part looks really flat, it's fine like that. And you can see I'm just kind of testing it, what it'll be like. And that's kind of what you want there. If they're too full, they'll sit so far out from the body. It just looks a bit strange, I think. Okay. So now we are going to sew our arms on. So basically with this, there's again no right way of doing it. You just kind of want the arm to sit evenly between the 2 sides of the dungarees. You don't want it too close to the front or too close to the back. I usually sew the arm on so it's about 1 row above the top of the dungarees. But really anything is okay. And just sew this on whatever way you like. Just try and keep it in a straight line, so that the arm is evenly straight the whole way across. And then just weave that last end in, and that's one arm done. And you can see it sits quite nice and close to the body, it doesn't sit too far out. And then you're just going to repeat that with the other side, and try and look at it from the front and see that the arms are kind of the same height and everything. You don't want it to be kind of unsymmetrical. You want everything to be nice and even. And then we'll get started on the legs. So the same with the arms, you're just going to turn these inside out, give them a wee poke with the crochet hook if you need to. And with the legs, you can stuff these quite firmly, that's fine. It's actually, I think, a bit better if you stuff them more firmly. And then you're going to sew these on. So again, there's no right way of doing it. It's just wherever you think they look good. You could even put his wee legs out to the front and have him in a sitting position. But, sorry, a lot of this is off camera. But, yeah, it's just, again, a lot of trial and error. I'm really bad at knowing what round I'm sewing into, so sorry I can't give you like exact details. But anything really is good as long as you're happy with them. Okay, so now we are going to make the chains for the dungarees, and all you need to do is make a chain long enough that stretches from the front of the dungarees to the back, as you can see here. And then once you've done that, you can finish off. It's as easy as that. And you want to make one chain for each side. So after that, you're going to sew them on. And again, with the sewing, there's no right way of doing this. I just kind of weave in my shorter end to hold it in place, and then from there I can kind of see where I want to sew it on, and then all you do is sew it on. And then you're just going to do the exact same on the other side. Then I'm just going to poke all my loose ends in, and time for the hair. Okay, it's time to make his hair. So you just want to cut a bit of black yarn that is going to be longer than you need and make a double knot near the bottom. And then you're going to thread this through your needle. You're going to want it to come up through that middle hole in his head. So just make sure that's where you're pulling through to. You're going to pull that through, and then you can give it a big tug to pull that knot underneath, or you can poke your knot in using the back of your needle. Either way is fine. So I pull my knot through, and then I use my needle as well to give it a little poke under. And then you're going to repeat this another 2 times, so you have 3 strands of hair coming out of that middle. And you can see I'm giving it a good tug and it's not going anywhere, so it's pretty secure, which is nice. Then you want to cut the hair to length that you want. And at this point, you can see the yarn is made up of kind of 3 thinner strands. So I kind of unravel these strands to make his hair a little bit more full looking, like so. And I just gave it another wee cut to the length that I wanted. And there you go, that's his hair. Okay, so now you're gonna sew on his mouth, and you need to take some black yarn, and basically you can do this in any design you want, and just trial and error it. Here you can see I chose a grumpy face, and honestly it took me about 3 tries to get it right. So the final thing we're going to do is make the headband for his goggles, which just goes around the back of his head, and what you'll need is your black yarn here. And essentially you're just going to chain as many that will fit around his head. There's no right number here, so it's just a bit of trial and error. So you'll see me doing that. And then as you go, just keep testing it around his head, see if it's long enough to reach both sides of the goggles. You don't want it any longer than that, you just want it touching both sides of the goggles. And then once you're happy with that length, you are just going to single crochet in all of those stitches again, starting with the 2nd stitch from hook. Then you can cut your yarn and finish off, and that's that finished.
and then it's time for sewing on. So there's no right way of doing this. You can sew it on any way you like, but just try and make sure it's in a straight line along the back of his head. You don't really want it being wavy up and down. And I just sew one way and then sew the other. And once you're done with that, I just poked in my loose ends, and that is him finished. So you have made your very own minion. I'm really happy with how this one turned out, and I hope you're happy with yours as well. So thank you for following along with this video, and I'll see you next time.